and it's truly unprecedented. It is an emergency that Brazil has chosen to prosecute a friend of mine, and therefore, as a president, I'm declaring under emergency powers a 50% tariff on all goods from Brazil, a nation where the U.S. has a trade surplus, not a trade deficit, because his friend is being prosecuted. That is not an emergency under IEEPA. That is an unprecedented use of that power, and we need to take steps, and my colleagues here and I will take steps to challenge the president's use of the emergency powers in this most unusual way. Glad to be together with a team that is battling these chaotic, consequential, and corrupt tariffs that are hurting Americans.
Thank you, Tim. And before we get to questions, Tim mentioned you couldn't believe he would do something he did yesterday. Here's even something more confounding. Some breaking news. Just now, the White House announced construction of a $200 million White House ballroom that will begin in September. A $200 million ballroom. Where'd this money come from? Did Congress appropriate it? I don't think so. It's almost like DOGE was never about waste at all. It was about cutting services to help Trump and his billionaire buddies. So it seems that DOGE was all about making cuts on Americans to fund their ballroom? Was that what DOGE was all about? So let's recap Trump's week in terms of its economic effect on American people and in terms of corruption. This week, he opposed stock trading bans for members of Congress and the president, something we support. He's now spending $900 million to refit his corrupt plane from gutter. He announced plans to build himself a new White House ballroom so he can eat his cheeseburgers in there in luxury. And he's imposing a new double tax on American families through his tariffs. As was said, costs, chaos, corruption, all embodied this week as typical on this subject.
I promise I have a question on this subject, but aesthetically, on the White House construction, it will be almost 2 times the size of the main White House building.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that? You're a New Yorker.
Listen, I'm happy to eat my cheeseburger at my desk. I don't need a $200 million ballroom to eat it in.
Understood. Okay, entree. Senator King touched on this a bit, but the president makes it sound like trading partners are very eager to come and negotiate and that they're happy when all is said and done, but you all travel internationally, you all talk to ambassadors. Reputationally, what is this doing to the United States?
It's making Trump's tariff negotiations, tariff threats, tariff chaos is making, first, a fool of the United States in the eyes of the nations of the world. And second, the worst thing is because we care about the average American, $2,400 more in costs? Look at that. It's crazy. And since you mentioned Tim, I was just going to bring Tim over.
Yeah, but what was the question? I was still
Okay,
listening to you.
On the world stage, what,
Yeah.
you know.
Well,
Ron can.
you were just
Ron is.
about your visit.
Ron Wyden is on the world stage. He knows.
All of us have been interested in this, but I took a bipartisan delegation to Canada, and one of the principal questions just a few days ago was who they were going to make alliances with other than the United States, because it was clear that they didn't know what was going to happen. They didn't know whether they heard that a deal was going to be on this particular approach, and then it was kind of taken in a completely different direction. So there's no question that the relationships that we have forged over the years, in some cases for decades, particularly in terms of having these alliances, we've got people we can count on, based on what we saw in Canada, are taking a big toll, and we really have no better friend than Canada. So if they're walking and not interested in some of these deals, that's a message.
And on a strategic, I was just going to say on a strategic basis, instead of him allying with our allies against China when China does all kinds of trade imbalances with us and doesn't treat us fairly, he's having them join with China against us. How profoundly stupid and unthought out.
Can I give I'm going to give an example. I was in Germany in April to talk to Germany about aid to Ukraine. So I went to Kyiv, Berlin, and Warsaw, and it was all focused on Ukraine. But everywhere I got, before I could talk about my issue, they were like, well, wait, what about tariffs? So here would be the German example. They rewrite their constitution to enable them to put more into defense. They elect a new government that's probably the most pro-U.S. government that they've had in Germany for a very long while. And the government that's elected, the new chancellor, has a mandate, and that's jumpstart the German economy that's been in the doldrums since 2019. So you're meeting with the new government. It's like, we are your friends. We are together with you in Ukraine. We want to put in more. We're pro-U.S. We just got elected with a mandate. You are the biggest obstacle standing in the way of us and the mandate we just got from the German people, because the tariffs are going to hurt this German export economy so badly. So as Chuck said, these are punishing our allies more than our adversaries, and sometimes they're even punishing Americans more than our allies. The president cuts a deal to put a 15% tariff on Japanese products. Toyota stock goes up by 8%. Why? Because even at 15%, it is now cheaper to buy a Japanese vehicle in the United States than one made in America with a lot of content from Canada and Mexico. So we're hurting allies for adversaries, and we're hurting ourselves to the advantage of others. It makes no sense.
We're hurting our own countries. Ford announced a $2 billion loss in Good Pork because of the tariffs. Yes.
My question is related to what you just said, which is you've had two IEPA votes. One passed, one probably would have passed if White House and McConnell had been.
Would have passed.
But at any rate, my question is, given these earnings reports that we're having, and given that the deals have resulted in substantially higher tariffs, do you think that there could be movement among Republicans so that you could get a veto-proof majority, which of course you would need to actually end the IEPA tariffs if the courts do not?
Well, I'll call on Maria for a minute, because she had a bill to put it back in Congress where it was, and I think 7 Republicans joined it.
Yeah.
Maria.
Well, and also if you could touch on Section 338 and 122 in case IEPA is overturned in the courts, is there something Congress should do about these other archaic?
Well, the courts are looking at these issues now, and the lower court, as you can see, basically said there was nothing in what the president was trying to say from emergency perspective, and we don't think he's following the law as it relates to 301 or any of these. When you do tariffs like this, you have to have detailed economic analysis of the damage and the cause, and then make a point, because trade is about world trade rules and order, not about just making something up, whoever's president. I mean, that's what distinguished, even back in England, they were like, no, we're not giving this power to the king, because people realized in the founding of our country that that's a dangerous thing to have a king or a president have this ability, because it is basically a tax. So they wanted to have a legislative body do this. So I think that they have not proven their use of these tariffs in any of the, I know they think, that Secretary Lutnick said he could fall back on 301, but you really have to have a very detailed case on 301. So listen, I represent 2 big companies in the state of Washington, Boeing and Microsoft, who just had great earnings reports. Why did they have great earnings reports? Because they're investing in next generation technology and they're selling into a global market. Okay, the president is proposing a contraction of us doing that. He's not proposing, he's cutting all the science and R&D. He's cutting all the things that said come to the United States and make these things. And as my colleagues just mentioned, he's making all our allies mad. So they're thinking, well, how do I counter the United States? Instead of saying, this is a global market, lots of opportunity. How are we going to reach those markets? How can we get our products into those markets? And so the cost on the American consumer, and I think the president thinks, oh, well, somehow they'll come back. You might force some elements to come back, but at what cost? And the growth that we've had in a global expansion is 95% of consumers live outside the United States. The United States should be attracting the best and brightest, making the best and the best products, and selling that on a global stage, not this contraction.
And do you think you can get more Republicans on board to check these powers?
Well, so yes, I do, because my Republican colleagues have said, let's see the deals. And now, while there's a lot of trumpeting of these deals,
So to speak.
they are handshake deals. The Wall Street Journal called them willy-nilly. I just think they don't represent the scope of what my colleagues, when you think about the first Trump administration and what happened with China, where they didn't follow through anyway, and our farmers were hurt, and then they came to Congress and said, you cough up the money to make our farmers whole, which taxpayers ended up doing, is not what I think my Republican colleagues have in mind. So I think as these details of these deals become clearer to them, I think you probably will hear more from them.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
On the topic of unprecedented, because you mentioned that word, it is unprecedented that some Republicans are saying they want to go nuclear on changing the Senate rules, but others I talked to want to do this in a bipartisan manner. Tillis, for example, mentioned working with Democrats. Are you supportive of doing that?
We certainly want to work in a bipartisan manner. First, remember, we're staying here, not because of us, but because John Thune wants us to stay here. Second, we are exchanging paper and in conversations to try and come up with a bipartisan agreement. Last one.
Yeah, one of the things that you guys are working on in a bipartisan way so far is appropriations.
Yes.
You know, we had a very messy long-term CR in March. You took a lot of heat by deciding that shutdown would have been worse for Democrats than what you ended up signing on to allowing. You're going to have a similar fight here in a couple of months. Do you still have that same view that a shutdown
Look,
would
the
actually work?
The ideal way to solve this is Democrats and Republicans working together in a bipartisan way to come up with appropriation bills. And we're making some progress on that. Senator Murray and Senator Collins are working together, and that's the way we ought to go. We hope Republicans will join us that way. Thank you, everybody.
Hey, you guys, watch 232. It's like the Canadians think it's just impossible.
Did you see that Treasury Secretary Bessent did suggest that they might end up with 50% aluminum for 10 years?
Was that today?
Yeah, let's see.